Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1021 just came out, and this was a great chapter for two reasons. First of all, we got, I think, the first truly great 1v1 battle out of Onigashima. I think Robin versus Black Maria, I think, is the first true, what I would call a classic One Piece fight that we got out of Onigashima. So we're going to talk about that. And the other great piece of news is that a theory that I put out a long time ago talking about Momonosuke being aged up to adult form in Wano and why that was going to happen came possibly true with this chapter. At the very least, the idea is being talked about and is now up for grabs. Like, it's actually up as an option in the story and very likely will happen. Maybe not at this moment, maybe a little bit in the future, but it does look like, if it's being brought up in this manner, that we are going to get to see adult Momonosuke. We are going to see adult Momonosuke at some point in the story being aged up to have some sort of a relevant moment in the Wano plotline. So go check that theory out after this. I expand upon it a little bit. I'm going to talk about it in a moment. The other really good piece of good news that we have is we have almost hit our plush goal of 200 plushes. This is the last 24 hours to hit that goal of 200 plushes to get the Marineford analysis video. So hit that link in the description below to grab your plush. You have 24 hours left. If we hit 200 plushes sold, I am going to be making the largest One Piece analysis video project I have ever made. It is going to be on why Marineford is arguably the greatest manga arc ever. So I'm very excited for it. Hit the link in the description below to get yours before the time runs out. So all that being said, I want to start from the end of the chapter talking about Luffy and Momonosuke first before getting into Robin versus Black Maria. Luffy and the Momonosuke scene, I did mention towards the end of the last chapter that it was very possible that Caribou would be the one to be able to provide all of the meat for Luffy to, heal up, rest up, etc. And lo and behold, that he did. Caribou, he is still, of course, a major wildcard for the rest of the arc. It is very interesting to see how he will become relevant. He has this vital information. Whether that will come into play this arc or some arc in the future when he finally gets to that boss that he was talking about all the way back in Fishman Island, we will find out, right? But at the moment, he's a helping hand getting Luffy that meat. The interesting part is that it looks like the way things are panning out, Luffy's probably going to be able to get back to Onigashima at roughly around the time that the rest of the Strides fights kind of wrap up. At least seemingly wrap up. We don't know yet for the moment, definitive or not, although I will admit that this Black Maria fight, I think that was the first time I was like, oh, it looks like, I would take that as Robin did actually just beat Black Maria. Not sure yet if Awakening or anything like that is going to come into play. But we'll get to that in a moment, right? Trying to structure things out. So, Luffy going to Onigashima, the fights we've got left that really matter are basically Sanji versus Queen, and probably, my guess would be Zoro versus King. I don't know how much Oda will want to delve into things like Inuarashi versus Jack, or Nekomamushi versus Perospero. Let's wait and see. I do think generally Oda likes to have the Straw Hat Slide fights essentially line up and get knocked down before Luffy comes back in action. So I think things are going to time up pretty nicely that Luffy is going to be flying back into the scene probably in the next 4 or 5 chapters after the other major fights are basically done, right? So, to make that happen, it seems like Momonosuke needs to be able to turn into an adult. Now, when I first dropped the theory about age manipulation in Wano and how Momonosuke was very possibly going to be aged up to adult form, I mentioned that I thought that it would have to be Jewelry Bonnie to do it because the initial explanation we got of Shinobu's fruit was that it can only, as I understood, only mature or age in organic objects. So far we've seen her use it on things like, rocks, the earth, etc., like the floor, right? So that's generally how we've seen Shinobu use the maturation fruit. So my assumption was that, okay, Shinobu would not be able to age Momonosuke into an adult. We would need Jewelry Bonnie. However, flip side, even if Shinobu does age Momonosuke right now into an adult, there is someone in the One Piece universe who could age him back down, right? Someone who is in fact not captured by the world government at the moment. She is actually a free pirate, and last we saw of her was at Marijoa during the Reverie, right? So I still believe, and I believed for a while, that we will see more Supernova, more characters arriving in Wano. To me, this does provide some level of evidence that I doubt that we would see Momonosuke just aged into an adult and he just is an adult for the rest of the arc or for the rest of his life. Well, I guess everyone becomes an adult for the rest of their life. But you guys know what I mean, right? Like, I don't think we'll see Momonosuke just aged right here and then he's just in adult form from now till the end of the One Piece story. I would imagine that is kind of a terrible existence, right? Just being a kid but trapped in an adult's body and basically just having to live with adult responsibility. I don't think that Oda would go down that route. I think that Momonosuke might be aged up temporarily to, accomplish what needs to be accomplished. And again, if you go watch that video that I put out, there is a lot of setup from before this as to why it feels like Momonosuke, or why Momonosuke in particular, one of the great things that he's been grappling with is how he will be able to fill his father's shoes, or kind of become that sort of figurehead, that leader for Wano, a warrior for Wano as a child. That's one of his biggest recurring issues that he's had throughout, starting from Zou all the way to now, how he as a child can be of use to the Alliance, how he as a child can kind of make a change, right? And I think he's done a great job so far inspiring confidence in the Alliance as a child. It does seem like Oda is now implying that basically to do something a little more physical, like flying Luffy all the way to Onigashima and probably, being able to create flame clouds to stop Onigashima from falling. It's very possible that Momonosuke would need to be a large adult dragon to do so. But I don't think that we will be seeing adult Momo from now till the end of One Piece, which is why I think it's very possible that Jewelry Bonnie would have to be involved in some way to age him back down, which is why I think this adds a little bit more evidence to the idea that more characters, at the very least, that things are going to potentially go on a little longer, because more characters could be making their way to Wano, and that would result in a scene where Momo gets aged down, maybe aged back up. I don't know exactly how things will work out, but very interesting to me that this is actually being brought up at this point in time. I think I personally, even though I put out that theory about Momo being aged up, I think at some point in the story I started to prefer the idea, not in terms of what I believed is more or less likely to happen, but more so in terms of what I would personally prefer to happen. I preferred, at least for the starting phases of Momo's journey, for him to have one really, really big moment where he's able to sort of save the day as a child, right? Before essentially being aged up to becoming an adult to maybe be able to participate in a more physically impactful way. So I had hoped, I guess Momo did have a really good moment of leadership while he was up on the cross, and that was as a child, so that was a big deal. So maybe the moment of actually holding up Onigashima, perhaps that does, assuming that's going to happen, perhaps that does make more sense as an adult. So we'll wait and see. I know you don't want to hear about Momonosuke right now. Let's talk about Robin. So this fight was really, really, really good. I think it is very difficult to do a good Robin fight. Very difficult to do a good Robin fight, simply because I've talked about this before, but Robin's ability, the way it works, at least in the past, it tends to lend itself to either Robin can beat the person very quickly, right? Because she can immediately overpower them and use her clutch hold and defeat them. So either she can defeat them immediately, or they're for some reason out of the range of her abilities and she cannot defeat them because perhaps they're a Logia, perhaps they're too physically strong to be restrained, perhaps they're too large to be restrained. So we've seen that in the past in a variety of ways, right? So it's usually a binary situation with Robin. Either she can win or she can't, and it's hard for there to be some sort of in-between. So Black Maria is a really cool challenge just in terms of a straight-up matchup, because Black Maria, we got to see more back and forths between her abilities and Robin's abilities, because a lot of Robin's abilities clashed with Black Maria's in a way that like one could cancel out the other or hard counter the other. So first of all, Robin in giant form fighting Black Maria in giant form, that was an interesting use to be able to see of her abilities. Robin producing a lot of limbs, but Black Maria is able to produce a lot of webs to sort of make it harder for Robin to capture Black Maria or get a hold of her, and it interferes with Robin's ability to bloom her limbs, right? And then on top of that, of course, Black Maria's ability to produce fire, that makes a big, big problem for Robin being able to produce her limbs. So in that, in a generally very large variety of ways, we have seen Robin versus Black Maria producing kind of more dynamic interactions than we usually get out of Robin's battles. But that's not the big reason I like this fight. One was definitely because I think this was the first time in a long, long, long time that we got to delve back into Robin's character and attack her sort of character insecurities and conflicts that she's developed growing up, right? And in a different manner than before, because we're at a different stage in the story than before. So for the longest time, let's say for Enies Lobby, right, most of Robin's life, what she had feared was essentially, or what she had feared was being called a monster. Her existence was a sin. That was the big thing hanging over her head. The fact that she had this dangerous knowledge and the ability to gain more dangerous knowledge, that made her existence a sin. So Black Maria is not exactly saying that, but she's attacking Robin's insecurities from a different angle, in that, no, obviously we're at a point where like everybody wants Robin's knowledge, right? But what Black Maria is angling it at is basically, well, your only value is your knowledge. That's the only reason people want you. You're only useful for your knowledge. So we'll take you. We're happy to have you. We're happy to have your knowledge, but that's the only useful part about you. The Straw Hats, they don't care for you. They only care about your knowledge. And that's the only reason that, like, Sanji obviously called you in, because he doesn't care about your well-being. So the only thing of use that you've got is basically what's up here. So it's a little bit of a different angle. It's not, you know, the Enies Lobby, existence is a sin, that sort of thing, but it does go back to the same root problem that Robin has always faced, that she has access to dangerous knowledge and the ability to gain more dangerous knowledge. So, and now obviously this is how the pirates choose to, like, how pirates of the New World who want that knowledge attack her, versus how the world government, like, just comes down on her for even having that knowledge in the first place. So I like that it's going back to the same core problems that her character has faced growing up, but it comes at it from a different angle that makes sense from this group, you know, the Beast Pirates who obviously want that knowledge but want to just use it and abuse it, in contrast to the world government, who do secretly want to use it and abuse it, but also want to chastise her for even having that knowledge in the first place. So I definitely really like that. I also really like that this was a physically brutal sort of matchup for Robin, in that she, like, I think Oda does often try and treat his female characters with, I guess you could say, like, kid gloves in terms of the damage that they take over the course of a battle. So, you know, at first with this fight, Robin, her giant body was taking damage, and her giant limbs were taking damage, which of course made her regular body take damage, and I was like, oh, that's pretty brutal. But then we saw Black Maria just straight up hitting Robin's regular body. And Robin's like a normal human being, and Black Maria has a gigantic, you know, just gigantic, probably the biggest out of all of the Tobi Roppo, Kaido, and the Calamities included. She is the largest member of the Beast Pirates, not counting the numbers. So that's pretty insane. She's a zone user. She's clearly a very physically formidable fighter. So it goes to show, I guess, well, all One Piece main characters have ridiculous amounts of durability and toughness, of course, but I do think that this goes to show, like, Robin has actually probably physically toughened up somewhat over the course of the time skip. And that is the last big point that I really liked out of Robin's fight, which is we got a flashback for her that actually delved into how she developed new techniques and new fighting abilities, because a lot of us were kind of left in the dark in terms of how much each of the strides grew over the time skip. I think this is the first time, aside from Luffy and Zoro, that we really got, aside from Luffy and Zoro, I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, that we really got a bit of a flashback into Stride's learning time skip techniques, right? And with Robin, it was a technique we didn't really realize was a technique at the time. It was the technique that she used right away, actually, as soon as we hit Subodi Archipelago, or returned to Subodi Archipelago and we're traveling down to Fishman Island, right? The Gigantesco Mano. I think I said that totally wrong, but I think that's how it's spelled. I might be totally wrong. But the giant palm move, right? So I like the fact that we got to see her interactions with Sabo and Koala, and that those two together, and a bit of Fishman Karate, like the three of them really were the influences behind Robin realizing that she could use palm attacks more so to fight against opponents in the New World. And so the big move that she busts out is, of course, this giant palm move that I like that it's not just slamming, like just hitting Black Maria. I like that it's being used intelligently to bring the ceiling down, because again, I just liked a lot of the creativity that came with the moves that were showcased throughout this chapter, and kind of the various interactions we got. So Robin using a giant palm to bring the ceiling down to cancel out Black Maria's fire. Great move. She did not have to rely on Brook this time to freeze the flames. She was able to do so herself, even though her abilities don't naturally lend themselves to putting out fires, right? So really good. It is still funny to me though that palm technique is the one that we got this long flashback for this chapter, because, you know, the palm technique was cool, but that black devil form? How did we get a flashback for the palm technique? And then Robin after that uses this clearly ultimate move, giant black devil form, that we've never seen before. We don't even know if it's Haki yet. We don't know what it is. We don't know if that's just some interesting shading, coloring choices that Oda is using, but it could be Haki. She busts that out and is just able to wreck Black Maria. It's interesting to me that Robin is like so much time is spent building up that palm, you know, that one big palm hit, which was definitely very cool. And then after that, Robin follows it up with something that's like, whoa, no, that's the specialty move. That's the ultimate move right there. When are we getting the flashback for that? So I think that, you know, to me that was just a little funny the way that things played out there. Again, the last part of the fight that I really enjoyed was just the reversal in terms of Black Maria starting off basically being, you know, Spider with Robin caught in her web essentially, and being like, I'm going to tear off your limbs one by one. The only thing that's useful inside of you is your head, your knowledge. I like that, by the way, because it plays into there's such a fit with how Oda is approaching Black Maria's the angle Black Maria is attacking Robin with, which is like, oh, well, the only reason people care about you is the knowledge you have. And Black Maria's entire, ability and persona, which is this giant spider that catches people in webs. So it makes sense that she's like, I'm gonna tear off your limbs because she's a giant spider. I'm gonna tear off your limbs because the only thing of value is what's inside your head. It just fits, right? It just fits with the way Oda designed the character and how Oda chose to have her taunt and attack Robin. I like it. So the last part of the fight that I really, really enjoyed is the reversal we got at the end, which is Robin in this giant black devil form basically overpowering Black Maria and being like, oh, well, all I need, you don't need these limbs, why don't I tear all of them off? I don't know, it just felt very, very like an old school Robin sort of move. I really, really like this entire fight from her. I've said that many, many times. And I will admit, this is the first Tobiropo fight where I think Jinbei versus Who's Who was a great, very well choreographed fight. Probably just as well choreographed as this, maybe better, arguably, depends. But it didn't have a story, right? It was really just an exposition dump from Who's Who. It didn't really do anything for Jinbei's character, in my opinion. Jinbei was more so a very passive, kind of responding a little bit bystander in that fight. It was mainly the choreography, the action that Jinbei was involved with. He was not really responsive that much to. It was mostly like Who's Who's show for that entire fight, I think, in terms of him spilling a lot of secrets about the world and stuff, and Jinbei kind of just like letting that bounce off him and being someone to bounce that off of, right? So not much of a story to that fight. I didn't really buy that fight ending necessarily. Frankie, sort of the same thing. I think Frankie, we had much less exposition. We had more action, more choreography, but there wasn't much of a story to that fight, I would say. It was just kind of, honestly, a lot of little comical gags happening. And sure, a lot of Frankie's fights are like that, but there is also generally a stronger flow or story to their fights than what we've seen before. Maybe I'll talk about this more at length in another video. But yeah, I also felt like Frankie versus Sasaki, it did not convince me that fight, it didn't feel like a very impactful or conclusive way to end that fight, because I didn't feel like that much had happened in that fight aside from getting some, some cool little action bits. This was the first fight to me that felt like a true One Piece fight, very dramatically powerful, I guess, at least for Robin, at least comparing to, how Robin has been handled, I think, so far in the New World. I think this was the most dramatically powerful chapter that we've had for Robin in a long, long time. It told a story over the course of the fight, and it felt like this was something important that her character was able to overcome over the course of the fight. And these are a lot of things that I expect out of One Piece fights. That's what makes One Piece fights great. And that's usually what makes the ending to One Piece fights very cathartic. So this was the first fight that I felt like, okay, I actually, maybe I'm wrong. I think that the Tobiropo, I think Robin might have just beaten Black Maria, because this was a great way to tell that fight. So I'm interested to see how things go from here on out. I think this is the first time I'm questioning, like, whoa, maybe are the Tobiropo actually going to be beaten right now? But they've not used Awakening yet, and I'm still definitely not convinced on the previous two fights, because I just think that those are relatively, like, if you compare those to Robin's fight that she just got now, to me, I was like, yes, this feels like an actual Straw Hat battle. This feels like what we've seen in the past from the Straw Hats, right, in terms of the way Oda writes the story of their fights. So the fact that those two don't really match up to this makes me also question this a little bit. And again, Awakenings we have yet to see. I guess the last thing to mention is Brook. I don't know. Brook is always a little frustrating to me, because I think people are always happy with the bare minimum. Because Brook does anything small and people are like, oh, Brook, MVP, awesome. I'm like, no, why don't we want a real fight out of Brook? Like, why is Brook being held to this weird, like, lower standard where when Brook does anything at all, like, I really like the move he used to defeat the Number and all of Black Maria's henchmen. Really, really cool move. But at the end of the day, this was not just like a Robin takes lead, Brook is sidekick sort of situation for the Black Maria battle. It was really just a Robin versus Black Maria battle, which I have no problems with. I would have loved to see Brook actually get a fight of his own. And maybe he still will, but it did feel like that musical note move that he did right there was a pretty conclusive. I think that's Oda kind of checking off in his mind the Brook fight. So, I don't know, that's a little disappointing to me at least, just because, I think Brook has never gotten a fight. I don't think people realize that. Brook has never gotten a fight where he's won. Okay, I don't count against that Fishman in Fishman Island, because I'm talking about a real, genuine story fight like we just got for Robin. So, I'm surprised why everyone I think everyone is just very easily pleased with Brook. Like, oh, Brook did something. Awesome. Brook's the MVP. Brook's the hero and stuff. I'm like, no, why don't we just hold him to the same standard as the rest of the Straw Hats, which is, I would expect Brook to actually get some focus on him, like some genuine focus, rather than a random action side panel or some random minor contribution to somebody else's fight. So, that's all on Brook's end. I really, really hope we get something more out of him. I do think, by the way, though, watch out for Tuesday's video, because I do think that all of the Strats are going to get to shine in a very specific way, in a very, very major way, even beyond these Toby Roku fights coming up. So watch out for that video. And again, 24 hours left to get the plush. Get it, I guess, in the next 24 hours by hitting the link in the description below. And if we hit that 200 goal, I will be making the largest One Piece analysis video I have ever made. So, catch you all later.